Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday? It's Wednesday, yeah. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm Christian Ramirez. I'm the Kahn Assistant Curator of Contemporary Art and Community and Director of Engagements at Phoenix Art Museum. And thank you. And I'm so happy to have you all here today for the Lenhardt Lecture, which is one of our signature programs at the museum that I just love to be able to oversee and participate in. So before we get started, please turn off your phones because we don't want it to buzz, if that's okay. And yeah, Jeremy Mikulazek will come up and do a proper introduction of our two incredible guests. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Christian. And let's give Christian one more round of applause for tonight. Thank you. It's always great to hear when everybody says you have such an incredible staff here, and we are so privileged and fortunate to really, truly have such an incredible staff here at the museum and who really spend tireless efforts to really put these on. So thank you to the staff for really everything this evening and for organizing all of this. We want to welcome everybody this evening. This is an annual lecture here at the museum, and it's a core part of our arts educational programming. And on behalf of the entire museum, I want to offer our gratitude to the namesake family and donors who have supported this program since 2017, Don and David Lenhardt, who are up here in the front. Let's give them a round of applause. They have been instrumental in changing the landscape of this museum, bringing incredible artists to Phoenix, and also having these incredible conversations with scholars, writers, artists, and other arts professionals. And really, truly, at the heart of the Lenhardt program is the engagement with the community, and that's been a truly kind of a grounding aspect to this particular lecture series. It's not just a lecture series, it's really about creating community engagement, opportunities for students to really meet incredible artists and arts professionals, and we couldn't ask for a better opportunity and a better way to really support and impact our community. So thank you for that vision and that foresight. Let's give them a round of applause for that. As many know, I'm not shy on applauses, so I'm always there for gratitude of individuals. So we're really grateful to have this program, and again, there's just a long roster of artists and individuals who have been part of this program. So many acclaimed artists who have, sort of been on this stage and really spoke and engaged with students. And tonight is just really, truly another special event. And what a really great sort of continuation of a conversation. We were really fortunate this last spring to have Charles Gaines and Thelma Golden in conversation, talking about the project that we had here at the museum. And tonight, in the spirit of conversation, is really just to continue this format, which is just really engaging to have two individuals really talk about a body of work, to talk about a career and an experience, and really what's happening in the art world. And tonight we're honored to present artist Adam Pendleton in conversation with Dr. Adrienne Edwards, the Engel-Speyer Family Senior Curator and Associate Director of Curatorial Programs at the Whitney Museum of American Art. So thank you both for being here. Give them a round of applause. That may be one of the longest titles that I think I've ever read. We have some long ones here too, so it's just really wonderful. Before I share more about our esteemed guests this evening, I want to give a warm welcome to, of course, our Circles of Support members, our Board of Trustees, and our museum members here this evening. Let's give them a round of applause. We're just really grateful for all that you do for this institution. You are the lifeblood of this institution, and you provide such incredible leadership and support for everything that we do. So thank you for that. I also want to recognize Prime Stake Concepts, which is Stake 44, and of course, forthcoming, the amazing Durant's, which hopefully will open up later this December. I know. We're all very excited about that, and we're really grateful for them for really supporting the Lenhardt Lecture Series this year. And supporting, again, opportunities to also create, to really have artists and engagement, dine at their restaurants in support of that. And lastly, but most importantly, it's really, truly the artists and the community members that are here this evening. You are everything to this institution, and we are here for you. And we appreciate the privilege of your support, your time, and everything you do for the cultural community here in Phoenix. So thank you for your attendance this evening and for being part of this. Let's give them a round of applause. For those of you who may not know, but in this particular case, Phoenix Art Museum is very fortunate to have a work by Adam Pendleton currently on view in the Katz Modern Wing. The piece is titled Black Dada and is currently on loan from our friends at the Morpheus Collection. And it's really been a wonderful opportunity to share Adam's work with this community and to have it in context with so many incredible artists here in the collection at the museum and in context and conversation with the local community as well. If you haven't had the opportunity to experience the painting in person, I encourage all of you at the close of the lecture to go over to the Cat's Wing and take a look for yourself and just to see the magnitude of Adam's work in person, which is just phenomenal. And now I'm happy to share a little bit about our speakers this evening. And before I turn it over to them, I just want to give a short and brief introduction to each of our guests. Adam Pendleton is a central figure in contemporary American painting who has redefined the medium as it relates to process and abstraction. With his practice, Pendleton upends linear compositional logic, creating paintings through a distilled layering of gesture, fragment, and form that mirrors the cacophony of contemporary experience. Each of his paintings comes through life through expressionistic flourishes, stark contrasts, and subtle use of material, tone, and finish. They are also marked by a precision reminiscent of minimal and conceptual art. In his own words, Pendleton classifies his paintings as generative and poetic, offering fluid essential spaces for seeing, thinking, and feeling. And, you know, again, he really needs truly no introduction as he's been in numerous exhibitions and is part of incredible prominent collections throughout the world, including the Museum of Modern Art, the Guggenheim Museum, the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Studio Museum in Harlem, as well as the Tate Modern in London. So incredible work to see. So thank you. Tonight in conversation, he is joined by Dr. Adrienne Edwards, the Engelsbehr Family Senior Curator and Associate Director of Curatorial Programs at the Whitney Museum of American Art. I'll get it going really fast here. Dr. Edwards has been a curator at the Whitney since 2018, and from 2021 to 2024, she served as the Whitney's Director of Curatorial Affairs before assuming her current role. In 2022, she was the president of the international jury of the 59th Venice Biennale, and in 2023, she was a jury member for the 40th anniversary edition of Video Brazil. Prior to the Whitney, she served as a curator of Performa in New York City and as curator at large for the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where she oversaw the Mellon Interdisciplinary Initiative. Throughout her career, she has worked on numerous curatorial projects and exhibitions, including more than 50 commissions in film, performance, and the visual arts. Dr. Edwards has also taught art history, performance, and visual studies at the SUNY Graduate Center at New York University. And most importantly and most impactfully, she is currently a professor of practice in the Department of English and the Center for Imagination in the Borderlands at Arizona State University. So it's great to have her in Phoenix. So as I say, we are always so appreciative of your time, the privilege of your time, and for you to make space to be here and to hear these incredible artists and speakers. And as we all say, this is really about community, and you are the best of community. And so thank you for being here this evening. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Adam and Dr. Edwards. Please come on.
Enthusiasm. Please keep it up. Please keep it up.
It's a fun group, no? Good evening. It's really great to see everyone's faces and really, truly a pleasure to always be in conversation with Adam. And anytime there's an occasion to do so, to do that. And I also will do anything for Olga. So thank you, Olga. And I want to thank Jeremy and Christian. You've just been welcomed us. So much is about how you arrive to a place. And you all have received us in the most generous, thoughtful, and meaningful way. So thank you. And Dawn and David, who I know from the Whitney, by the way, because they also very important supporters of our museum. But it's great to be here with you in Phoenix. So thank you for being part of that arrival.
Before we start, I think we should give people a context to how we know each other and how long we've known each other and the ways in which we know each other, just so they have some context to the exchange that's about to
Okay,
ensue.
so you were 5 years old and I was 2 years old.
Almost, but no. I'll give the
you
context.
tell the story.
Okay. So I think we've known each other for almost 20 years now. And I think we sort of were circling each other, right? Because you were at Performa, and not at that moment in a curatorial role. I was a arguably young artist. I think I was, 20, 21, 22, something like that. I think there's, about 10 years between us?
Huh?
Well. And, some people just have a gravitational pull on you. And the moment you meet them, you're curious about who they are. And Adrienne was one of those people in my life when I met her. She had a gravitational pull, and I was curious about who she was. And in many ways, she felt like my sister very early on. I'll never forget, I was having a conversation with Adrienne, and my mom was in the car, and I was telling her literally everything. It was so raw. And my mom hung up, when I hung up the phone, she said, "Who was that?" As in, you shouldn't talk to anyone like that but family. So Adrienne is family to me. So you are hearing an intimate exchange in public between two people who have known each other and who have been through things thick and thin and have found each other, found a home with each other.
Yeah. I love you, Baba. So that's a good place to start, actually. The way we decided to structure this conversation is around something that Adam and I share, which is a love and attentiveness to language. And according to that, we decided that we would have key words or phrases that we would bounce off of one another. So that's how we're going to structure this conversation. The only thing I would add to what Adam said about our connectivity is that in New York, in the art world, when I heard Adam speak, I knew he was Southern. And I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Virginia." And I'm from South Carolina. So I was like, that I think is also a very deep thread that we share, is our Southernness, deep, deep Southernness. So you sent the phrase "to begin at the beginning." So I'm curious how you got from Richmond, or I want to share this because I know the story, but how you got from Richmond to New York as an 18-year-old. There are a million different things and different paths that you could have chosen, but you chose to become an artist. Where did that come from, and how did that bloom in you that would lead you to be in this place that you are today?
Well, I literally arrived, and I'll go forward in a moment, but I literally arrived in New York with my father. We rented a U-Haul van, put some of my paintings in the back, some clothes in the back, and we drove up together from Richmond, Virginia, which is where I was born and raised. And we drove to New York with a shared dream that I would become an artist, a successful artist in the context of New York City. And I remember my father, who had had a dream deferred of becoming a jazz musician, looked at me and he said, "You're going to do it." And I accepted that responsibility, that promise, and that dream. Before that, there was no choice, oddly enough. I think so many of us are used to choosing what we do, making a kind of determined decision. I'm going to be an architect. I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to be a doctor. Nothing ever occurred to me, for whatever reason, in the scope of my consciousness, other than to be an artist, which is so odd because what does that even mean? So the first thing one has to do is figure out what that means, and I started to do that probably when I was 12, 13, 14 years old. What I do remember, and what probably planted the seed, is I grew up in a house with literature, with books everywhere, with a love of writing, with a love of language. I grew up in a house where I could always hear my father practicing guitar, listening to music, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Diane Reeves. I remember him dragging me to Diane Reeves concerts. So there was always this kind of creative energy, this possibility of what can come of nothing, if that makes sense. So not ideas that are determined or predetermined, but rather ideas that are discovered slowly and then nurtured, and then they become something, even if it's something that is uttered from one's mouth. And I think what happened is I would read these books that were way above my, supposedly above my grade level, so to speak. Anything, Alice, I would think I was reading Toni Morrison when I was 10 years old, and June Jordan and Audre Lorde and Adrienne Rich.
Because your mom had these books.
My
around
mom
the
had
house.
these books all over the house. She gave me my love of language. And
Where did she get her love of language?
I do not know, but I know she wanted to be a writer. So I think, that was always something that she did not become a writer. She was a school teacher, but I think that was where her love of language came from, was the desire, the idea that she could have been a writer. And what I discovered in those books was that which was queer.
What do you mean by that?
That which was other, that which was different than what you see or encounter in everyday life, that which was strange and sticky and thick and a little bit opaque, but full of love, hope, and possibility. And that's what I decided art was.
That's interesting because the other thing that you mentioned to me as a phrase was to abstract. And maybe I'm curious about where queerness intersects with abstraction, or how is abstraction already queerness? But maybe I'm actually even wrong here because I'm already taking it away from its original point, which is to abstract. Which is a verb, right? Like it means to be in the inness of something, in the doing of it. So would you say something about how you found yourself at, or what was the precipice at which you shifted into a visual language that was abstract? And also, what do you mean by to abstract? Like, what did the work look like initially?
Before the abstraction.
Yeah. Like, how did you find yourself in that mode, means, method of making? And what do you think you were kind of driving towards?
It's arguably I have found abstraction in the past, I'd say 10 or 12 years. So let's just call it a clean decade, right? And I if we think back to, let's say, and sorry to make a reference that maybe a lot of people in this room don't know, but you know it. If we look back to the revival,
Which was a performance that you did for Performa in 2007.
yeah. And in that performance, what you see me doing is attempting to abstract a known form, which was a gospel-style religious revival. So that's like a known concept, a kind of gathering, a ceremony. So initially it was like, I know what this thing is, I know what it's supposed to do, now I'm going to mess with it. So that was initially what I thought abstraction was. Now, I mean, I'm going to give you one definition of abstraction tonight, and tomorrow it'll be something else. But abstraction is the fine rain of possibility.
The fine, as in?
F-I-N-E, the fine rain of possibility.
Rain.
Yeah.
Okay. Why fine and why rain?
Because that is my way of saying it's the scope of everything. We all live, exist within the possibility and the scope of abstraction, knowingly and unknowingly. So abstraction is not discovered, it is. And I think that's what is mistaken. We think we live in a world of and for representation, but we actually live in a space that is wildly and perpetually and constantly abstract and abstracting.
I think that's very true. But there's like 1,000 ways I want to take that right now. Maybe I'll start here. Because I really do fundamentally believe this, right? If you go back to W.B. Du Bois, who wrote many autobiographies, actually. Like, he was really trying to work through his political project using the self, the experience of his life, as a means to kind of question what would be a system, right? Or a prevalence politically or within the social structure. He always would return to the self. In the very last autobiography that Du Bois wrote, he talked about, he titled it Dusk of Dawn, the autobiography of a concept of race. Not the concept, not like my experience, but the concept.
Yes.
Which I have always been intrigued with because I think it pressures, which I think your work does, what we think conceptual art is. So if we index it and historicize it in relationship to the 60s and 70s, we have one trajectory around what we call art of ideas. But if you're trying to pressure the system and you have a particular experience, right? And that experience is colored, quite literally, then you have to return to the fact that that is in of itself constituted through a set of ideas.
Yes.
It's forged, right? So it's like if you talk about to abstract, the concept is already abstracting you.
Yes.
It's already either taking it to a bare minimum or to an excess.
Yes.
But nowhere in between. Which is why within the social order, it registers as a chaos.
Yeah.
Which is why abstraction is as a form in art making, a valid response to the social condition.
Yes.
Right? Which is why to abstract then gains a force bigger than itself. It's bigger than the terms we use to talk about art. It exceeds form. So I'm completely riffing now on,
Yes.
on what you said.
Well, you're to abstract, just to to ground this for a moment, to abstract is to want everything, and it's to want the possibility of everything. And I think that's also, if you think about W.E.B. Du Bois, that's inherent in his work. He wanted everything, right? And in that wanting, that desire for everything, or the possibility of everything, he had to quantify the contours and the terms of his existence. Because if he could quantify and mark it and catalog it, he could move beyond it, which is, of course, embedded in this concept of double consciousness, this mirrored self, this seeing you while you see me, right? Which I think, of course, is another way of articulating abstraction and how it really negates and supersedes and moves beyond the limits of representation.
Yeah, I want to come back to representation later because I think it's a misnomer, actually. But just to go back to the too abstract, could you tell us, because here in the galleries there's a really beautiful, incredible work, could you talk about how you make? How did you make the piece, for example,
yes.
that is in the gallery?
Yes. So I want complete freedom when I am painting, right? And so many people, or painters, let's say, when they approach their work, they're operating in what I would call precious conditions. You have the canvas in front of you, you have your brush or whatever your tool might be, and every mark you make is arguably precious. I didn't want that. I don't want that. I want to be completely free physically, intellectually, poetically. Again, I want all possibilities at my disposal. So I've created a practice, and you saw in the images at the beginning of the slideshow, where you see me in the studio really playing with the possibilities of freedom and agency and choice and chaos and catastrophe, the possibility of a mark, a gesture. So when I'm painting, it's perpetual discovery. It's research, arguably, which was something I actually talked about with ASU graduate students earlier this week. So every mark I make is an experiment, and it's improvised. What I'm doing, though, while I'm making these marks, along the way that I'm making on paper, I'm photographing what I've done on paper.
So you first do a series of marks
On paper.
on paper.
Then I photograph the marks I make on paper. Then the marks, once they're photographed, they're liberated yet again, because they go from marks on paper to really a file.
To really
A file. Like a
file.
digital file. So once I have this file, I can turn the painting arguably into anything. But what I choose to do is I choose to ground it within the space and the possibilities and the legacy of painting. And so those marks now are a file, and now I can screen print them. I can push them onto the canvas. But think about that difference between someone who's making, these small precious marks on the canvas. I'm making small precious marks, but I'm not limiting their possibility, because it's about perpetual discovery. If I don't like what I see, I literally white it out and I begin again. And I love those traces. I love the layering, those histories. And in that way, I'm completely free. Painting for me is a liberated space. And that's a part of what I want to offer the viewer. I want to offer them that freedom, the freedom of a concept, the concept of being, the freedom of a concept of doing.
So you then, like this work, the base of the painting, the underpainting, is black?
Yes, it's black, yes.
And then you screen print?
On the black surface, yeah.
On
The
black
ground
surface.
is black. The ground is enveloped in blackness, yes.
And
And then these marks emerge from the dark, from the darkness, from the black.
All screen printed.
All screen printed, yeah. And the marks are made initially in a variety of media: water, ink, spray paint. You see me painting in those images with a stick. Really anything I can get my hands on. There's a kind of wildness at play.
That's actually relatively recent, the wildness. It's almost like the wildness that I know to exist early on in your head. Like for me, the chaos was so much of your research and thought process before you actually got to making the work itself. Like there was just, and we can talk about this, but this constellating of all kinds of different things, from what you were reading to what you were listening to what you were encountering in your daily life, like all of to historical references, to something you heard on the street. Like there were all these things that were fomenting, and then you would take it to the works themselves, and it would be
very
super clean.
Removed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like austere.
Yes.
And then there was this swerve, and it became what I would really characterize as kind of feral, like a kind of, and I can observe in some ways that you're then, in some of these works, actually trying to retain the chaos, but give it some
structure.
Yes.
For sure. It's being an artist and making work is such a long journey, right? And sometimes you're trying to get things that don't line up to line up, like you're saying, all the thoughts that are going on in your head. And then you're kind of trying to get your head to relate to your body, and your head to figure out what your body can do, and your body to figure out what your head to do. And you're trying to get both of these things to kind of come together somehow. So they're almost these speech acts, these objects that exist outside of you in some strange way. And so I think what happened is through process, I was able to put more of myself into the work. And when I say myself, I really mean how I think, how I see the world, how I move through the world, quite literally. Now, what you see in the paintings are really things that I observe, for example, when I'm walking around New York City. Not just, say, the marks you see in an urban landscape, let's call it graffiti, but also the shadow, the weight of light hitting a building, or sounds that I see, or the skyline, right? Like, how can I put all of that visual information into the space of a painting? But a painting for me is also something that is structured, again, structuring possibility. And so there's this really wonderful tension that emerges where the paintings are both expressionistic, but also deeply conceptual, and all of that is happening at once. It's kind of like the difference if you walk into the galleries out there and you look at the Donald Judd. I love Donald Judd, right? But it's kind of like one thing is happening. And I hope in the space of my work, you see many things happening at once.
I mean, I want to go back to something you said in the middle there, which taps on and is a great transition, Adam, to one of our other phrases that we talked about in building our language, which is, how do we know what a body can do? And in some ways, this is deeply a philosophical question, right? Like, this is Spinoza's, the 17th century Dutch philosophers, imploring us to sort of ask this question of, well, how do you know what a body can do? And his answer to that was, you follow its desire.
I love that. You follow its desire. We'd be in trouble, though, if we all did that. I don't know if any one of us would even be here tonight.
Yeah, he got in a lot of trouble in his day, actually. Yeah, he was like excommunicated or something. But in that is this refusal to separate the body from the mind.
Yes.
And to realize that in their inseparability, that it was really insisting upon a kind of sensual life. My question to you is about, I see body in multiple ways in your work when this came up in our conversation. Like there is the body, like our physical experience in the world and being of the world. And then there is the body of work. Within the body of work, there is a seriality. Like Black Dada, you started in 2008, immediately after Revival, when you do your first performance that is all about the body. And then that is a series of works that has continued now.
To this day, yeah, almost 20 years, yeah.
Exactly.
Just under 20 years.
Yeah. So then there's the and you do that with a lot of your work. There's series. So you have an idea and you seem to want to exhaust it.
Yes, and those bodies of work change dramatically over time, yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. I want you to talk about that. But then there is also a body that is the work within an installation. That the installation is another kind of body, and that we are made to understand our bodies.
Right.
And therefore, the paintings or the videos or the sculptures in relationship to the installation that holds them all.
Yes.
Would you talk about why these deep dives, almost obsessive deep dives into these singular ideas that you then exhaust, and then how you think about showcasing these ideas in installation context?
Well, for one, I'm very slow, and I like ideas that are not obvious. And I like to really offer people the opportunity to not have to worry about meaning. Like even here tonight, while you're sitting here, you don't have to worry about if you understand what I'm saying. You just have to listen. And I love that about art. When you stand in front of a painting, you don't have to worry about what it means. You just have to look, which is really kind of crazy, radical, generous, and wonderful. And so in a strange way, when I take time with these ideas, I begin a dialogue with the audience, oddly enough. And I allow them to have a process of the same process of discovery that I am. So if you see something and you encounter it, it doesn't quite make sense. You like wonder, why is that D there? Why is that A there? Why is this a diptych? Why is it black, right? Like, why? That question, that questioning is a part of the fulfillment. And being fulfilled in that way, I would posit, makes you aware of your body, makes you aware of your humanity, makes you aware of your individual potential. I want to create things that make people aware of their tremendous capacity. And a part of what I do when I'm staging an exhibition is I'm creating a space for people to gather. I'm creating a space for a community of ideas. I'm creating a space for joy and possibility. I'm creating a space for language. I'm creating a space where we can just kind of let go of everything else and wonder and be in the radical possibilities of the present. And that's what painting is too, you know.
Yeah, but it's not. But it's not. It's not just painting, right? It's also, yeah. That's why I keep returning to. You're also creating context for the work to be received, which is different.
Yes.
I think not everyone does that.
No, not everyone. No, not everyone does that. You know, I find it very strange about, you know, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'll say it. I do find a lot of artists to be lazy. And that's okay. That's okay. It's okay.
What do you mean by lazy?
Well, you know, sort of. This is something I would say to Adrienne on the phone, by the way. You know, I feel a tremendous responsibility to claim and say I'm an artist, right? Because you're demanding people's attention. You're demanding that they look at something that you made. And there's only so much time in life, right? And we're making small choices and monumental choices all of the time, what to do with, quite frankly, what little time we have left. And I think that I want to create a world, right, of knowledge around my work, because I want to make sure that what I'm offering is deep and capacious, which is to say full of many things, because I feel as though there's an ethical responsibility that if I'm going to ask for or demand your attention, that I've gone deep, that I have a lot to offer, that I have a lot to say, that I have really done all that I can do to alter your perception of the world, and again, what your possibilities are in its context. So in a way, it's about them.
Can I go in a different direction?
Sure.
One of the things that, well, maybe it might be helpful to do this actually. Could you talk about your installations? And you could either talk about the Hirshhorn and what it feels like, because it's up now and it's up till 2027, right?
Yeah.
Major installation. And also the MoMA, Who is Queen, which was a massive, beautiful installation too.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk about one of those
Well, they're so different.
to kind of ground?
Yes,
one of them, what you're
absolutely.
saying?
So we saw some images, I think, at one point of the MoMA installation, which, when it was erected, was the, I think, 5th tallest wooden structure in Manhattan. It was 40 feet tall.
I'm like, how do you know that?
One must know what they're doing. And, you know, that piece was really, I mean, you saw that. That was everything. There was sound, there were the paintings, there were the drawings, there was this wooden scaffolding. You know, there were, 3 video works and 34 some individual paintings, drawings, et cetera. And I really don't want, I think a lot of artists, when they think, oh, I'm going to do an exhibition, they think, oh, I have 10 paintings, I'm going to hang them on the wall. That's not enough for me. I want to radically rethink, and this is something we share in common deeply, what an exhibition is. So if painting is form, if sculpture is form, if drawing is form, what happens when you allow, when you demand that the exhibition itself functions and operates as form? So for each exhibition, I'm really composing an artwork out of other artworks, one could say.
So the whole is, in fact,
The whole becomes a work of art itself, yeah. And each one is different. So MoMA was kind of, you know, in a way loud and bold, but also vulnerable, you know. And the show at the Hirshhorn, Love Queen, is really about creating a kind of rhythm that establishes an authentic sense of intimacy with the viewer. So you're really like on this journey, and it has this kind of visual tempo, which hopefully at some point becomes like music. The marks you encounter, the scale of the works, the color, the types of works, the shifting in perspective, the shifting in the possibilities of a mark, of painting, of color, they hopefully become a part of you. And this is unique to the circular architecture of the Hirshhorn, how and why I was able to do this. And you kind of get lost, you don't know where you are. And the show focuses on 30-some paintings, but it ends with a video work, which is very much so a painting of and with light and space. And I think that actually really becomes clear and resonates when you see the show. When you get to the end of it, you're like, oh, this is a painting too. And then you get kind of spit out back into the show, and I think you see all the paintings, all of the marks, all of the gestures in a radically different way. And I think if you can change someone's mind, that's really intimate, because that's kind of like how love operates, right? You don't love anybody when you first meet them, right? But you kind of convince someone, you should love me, right? Like, what's more intimate than that, than changing somebody's mind?
I mean, one of the things, because I know the film in the Hirshhorn looks at Resurrection City from 67?
1968.
And I think so much about your work is about the archive.
Yeah.
And the archive, I have come to really believe, is not at all about the past. The archive is profoundly about the future. It's the thing left there for us to pick it up and see what we'll do with it. Would you talk about a kind of archive that I feel like you have built in your work, particularly, it's throughout all of your work, but I'm thinking in this instance particularly around your videos and films, but is an attentiveness to the living archive, which are elders, right? Like the people who we seek and know for their wisdom. Would you, and I'm thinking about in particular, like in the Moment installation is a video to Jack Halberstam. There is the work you've done on Lorraine O'Grady, Yvonne Rayner, Ruby Sales, David
Let's talk about
Hilliard.
Ruby, because you showed Ruby at the Whitney for the Biennial. So let's talk about Ruby.
So talk about, let Ruby be the example.
Yeah.
Would you talk about elders?
Yeah.
And why?
Sure.
You
So
turned
those names might not have meant something to everybody. So I'm going to hopefully try to make Ruby Nelsels mean something for the people in this room. So Ruby Nelsels is like equivalent to saying Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela. How many of you guys know who Ruby Nelsels is? Just a couple people. That is like less than a dozen. That's extraordinary. So Ruby Nelsels, isn't that amazing, right? I mean, she's a living icon. She's a civil rights legend, icon, mostly known because she was protesting in the South, and she was protesting with a white man by the name of Jonathan Daniels. And Jonathan Daniels took a bullet for Ruby. And
He's a priest, Episcopal priest, I think.
I think he was a student, yes. At the time, I think they were both students, I believe. And so when the shot was fired, he jumped in front and took the bullet for Ruby. And so for years, Ruby did not speak. And so I was in the car driving around New York, and I heard this voice on the radio, which sounded like somebody's grandmother. And just to, again, try to give a quick context to Ruby's amazing capacity, she's telling the story of getting her locks done at her hairdresser's. and it's early in the morning, and the person who's doing her hair's daughter comes home and has clearly, as Ruby tells it, has been out all night. And then Ruby says, sex, drugs. And Ruby says that she turned to the young woman, and instead of maiming or scolding her, she said to her, "Where does it hurt?" And that stuck with me for, you remember this, like,
yeah, you called me from the car.
Yeah,
and
and
you
I
were
s-
like, "Have you heard of this person?"
yeah, and I like so many of you, I had not heard of Ruby Nail Cells, and I heard the way she said that. I heard her reach honestly towards abstraction. And I said, I have to speak to this woman. But I felt as though I didn't have the right to, quite frankly, speak to her because she was so wise, really, and full of tremendous generative love. But I finally built up the courage and the guts to reach out to her, and I sent her an email because she ran a program in Atlanta called Spirit House, and said, "I'm Adam Pendleton, I'm an artist in New York. I want to make a video portrait of you." And she said, "Call me." Her email was basically, "Call me." And I called her, and I didn't know what to expect. And, I said, "Hi, it's Adam." She said, "Oh, Adam, I looked you up. You're an artist." I said, "Yes, I'm an artist." And she said, "I would be so honored to work with you." And I remember I said to her, I said, "Ruby, the honor would be all mine." And it was actually just before COVID, so it must have been, February 2020. I spent 2 days filming Ruby, who had a house in the Bronx. She went to church in the East Village. And so basically to make this video portrait of Ruby, I basically wanted like a day in the life. Like, I want to spend 2 days with you, Ruby. What do you do? So she brought her girlfriends together.
Yeah, you called me. You were like, "Ruby's queer."
Yes, and well, so that was the other wild thing about Ruby, is that, you would have thought, oh, she's going to be this sort of, conservative Southern lady. And, she said to me, she said, "I'm a dyke." And she said, everybody knew I was a dyke.
Yeah.
And this is someone who grew up in the South, not when it was a thing. But she said, she
And
says
Polly.
in Polly, by the way. But she says in the video that I showed at the Whitney, I existed in a context. And and this is one of the most extraordinary things she says in the video. She says, "My parents were spiritual geniuses," which is to say, they created a web and a network of love around her to protect her from the violence of the world that could have been bestowed upon a queer Black woman in the South. And it is that capacity that Ruby lived her life with. So again, she was dealing in abstraction.
I'm just going to do a time check. Okay, one last question, Adam, and then we'll open it up for other questions from folks here. The last thing you sent me said, "to find freedom." And I'm thinking about Ruby now that you just talked about her. What did you mean by "to find freedom"?
That's You know, at any given moment, we are always making a choice of what we won't do or what we will do. And as an artist, I am consciously making those choices every day, but I'm also making them subconsciously. And what I'm most interested in relationship to a concept of freedom, is really a concept of dignity. The way in which we can have dignity for each other, dignity for art, dignity for living in relationship to each other, and even dignity for a conceptual idea of freedom, what it can be, to extend it to each other, to offer it to each other, to live in a space and a place that is generative and colored, that is iridescent and full of chaos and catastrophe. I want to read something because, you know, I thought you were going to ask me about color.
Okay, go ahead.
And I love this because it's something that I've known since I was a teenager, and it's actually the end of a poem by June Jordan. And it basically ends with, to glorify a color, yours is orange. Oranges are like you, love, a promising, a calm skin, and a juice inside. A juice inside, a running from the desert. Lord, see how you run. Your body is a long black wing. Your body is a long black wing.
Yeah, you had also sent me this. A moment yellow, just as 4 years later, when my father returned home from the war, the moment of greeting him as he stood of the bottom of the stairs, younger, thinner than when he had left, was purple. Though moments are no longer so colored. Yeah.
Thank you so
So we have time for a few questions. We have some microphones, so, okay, right in the back.
Yeah, I want to jump right in. So I'm an art teacher, and I see in you one of my students. And so I cannot help myself from asking you just maybe advice. I have recently gained this position. The students are fighting me on exploring different art mediums and styles and history. Right now we're exploring abstract expressionism. And this child, I believe he is 9th grade, looks at me and he says, "This is my art. This is what I'm supposed to do," while he's amidst multiple students who are just rolling their eyes and having terrible attitudes about the style, because I'm facing a world of artists that think they have to replicate realism in everything they do. So I feel, I guess it's a battle for me as a teacher to open up possibilities for some of these students, maybe open up their hearts to be a little bit more vulnerable in their artwork. But especially for this child, I really want to ask you maybe for advice, you know, on how I can best cultivate his talents, because he probably would love to see your work. It reminds me of some of his pieces so far this year.
Well, that is maybe the toughest question of the night.
You're welcome. We can come back to me if you would like.
Well, you know, let me just riff here and see what I can give you. But one thing I think of in this moment is I actually just got through Instagram a message from my high school art teacher, and she wrote me and she said, "Do you remember me? I was your art teacher, and by golly, do I remember her." And I remember all of my art teachers because it was the space that was totally different than everything else that was going on in the context of school. And, you know, I was a good student, right? And, you know, finished high school early, yada, 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 all this kind of stuff. But nothing, as you've heard tonight, gave me a sense of what was possible more than the art classes that I did. They gave me a sense and a feeling of belonging. They gave me a sense of a feeling that I could carry on. And it wasn't really because any teacher said, "Oh, you're so talented," or "Oh, you're so good." It was really nothing more than them creating a space for me to create. So that's really all you have to do. You have to continue to create a space for this student to create, but not just that student, but all the other students who are claiming they don't want to create. Because if they know it or not, they too have to create. We all have to create. We have to create in order to survive. Art is really about survival, because art is about how we exist and relate to each other. So if you can remind them of that, and the way in which you remind them of that is, again, to create a space for them to create and to understand what that is and what that capacity to create can mean and what it can become.
Any other questions? Down here. Okay. She's coming right down. She's hustling.
Hopefully the next question's for Adrienne.
No, it's for you. So you talked about your process of how you create. How did you come to using those things and doing those things? The layering, the sketching, what drove you to that? And then why Dada? And then lastly, when you look at your art in the abstract and you see what you see and what you created for, what do you want us to take away when we finish looking at your works? Was that hard?
Well, it's 3 questions. So I'll just answer them very matter-of-factly. I got to the process that I utilize today by an unwillingness to give up, and an unwillingness to settle, and an unwillingness for the work to be ordinary and to make work that is ordinary. So what I love about, I hope you guys know who an artist like Jack Whitney is, for example. So I love how artists are innovators, how they tackle problems in the strangest and unusual ways. I mean, think about any great artist you know, right? Like, they have the wildest processes. Like, think about Julie Meritou or Ellen Gallagher, right? Gerhard Richter, Jasper John, Cy Twombly. Like, these are wild practices. Joan Mitchell. Doesn't really make any sense, and they're so unique and specific. And I knew that I had to do that as an artist in relationship to painting, and really the only way you can do that is you don't give up. You just keep going, and by not giving up, you keep there are just these series of discoveries that inevitably occur. So that's how it happened. I did one thing, then I did something else, and then I did something else, and then I kind of put it all together like I was trying to make a meal. Why Dada? Because Dada is nonsense, right? It means what you want it to mean. Yes, yes, like some people say it means yes, yes. Sometimes it's just a sound or it's a noise. Again, I like this space where things are not determined or over-determined, where they're simply, or not simply, but they're generative and poetic. And that's also what I want you to have when you encounter my work. I want you to have, again, a sense of radical possibility.
We have time for one last one. Right in the back. Okay.
This one's definitely for Adrienne, I can tell.
Actually, it's for both you guys.
Good.
No, you guys, thank you for, first, the conversation is very interesting. I had a question. You guys were starting a conversation. You kind of never really completely finished it. When you're talking about W.E.B. Du Bois and the double consciousness, and ultimately how that related to representation. And you said you were going to elaborate on that further, and the conversation obviously just went where it went. Can you elaborate on that? Because that's such an interesting concept.
I'm so glad you came back to that, because and you called me, yeah, I didn't get to come back to it. But I think it has to do with this question of representation, right? Like everything about art is always framed and contextualized as being about representation, right? I mean,
If even only of ideas, right?
yeah, it's just constant. It's kind of shorthand for, in a way, for how we might even think about. It really limits art to be in the service of representing a body or an experience or a sensibility. But I actually think that that language is entirely wrong. And I think it kind of goes back to this question of how do we know what a body can do? We follow its desire. So you are not making because you want to represent an idea or because you are trying to represent ideas related to whether it's blackness or queerness in any way, or ideas related to the evolution of modern art and how it indexes specifically in many, many instances, including Dada, blackness, right? Like Dada comes because soldiers in World War II were on the continent and heard languages for the first time that they didn't understand. They came back to Switzerland, some of them, and started this avant-garde collective and started saying Dada. But it comes out of a war experience on the continent of Africa.
Yes.
So anyway, what I think it really has to do is about your agency, which you've already spoken to, which it is for so many artists, a desire to have your say, a desire to ask the questions that you feel are the questions you need to thrive, not to answer, but to ask. And that art creates a space where you can hold a reserve for yourself that is not about presenting anything in any like representative or figurative or defined or certified way, but rather is a space of desire and sensuality and play where things are not resolved. But the most important thing might be to have made the attempt in the first place. So this is what I wanted to say around the question of representation, but I don't know if you have something to add to that.
I mean, that was so well said. Not to answer, but to ask. We're really like evangelical. We're like, proselytizing for abstraction up here.
Listen,
it's like a road show.
We should go to church.
You know where we stand.
We should get a church. Get a mega church.
Of abstraction. I do just want to end by saying thank you to Adrienne for being here tonight. It's so nice to be. I want to thank Dawn and David for welcoming me here tonight and supporting this conversation. Olga, who I think I've known for like literally over 20 years, literally. You were the boss of my ex-boyfriend.
Also my boss.
I want to thank Jeremy. I want to thank Justin. Thank you. And I want to thank all of you for your time and attention and your generosity and for being present. Thank you so much.